shadowy. Okay.
Warming up.
There is something spinning. Oh, it's someone's doing a lucky draw.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've used that same wheel.
Former office mate is doing a free raffle thing. Okay, YouTube monitor is running okay. Facebook. There, it's live as well.
Okay,
Andre has hearted it. Hopefully that means he's watching too.
Tweet.
We're sharing as well.
Oh, where am I going? There.
The signal boosting to friends.
I see. It's like because it's appearing in all the chat groups we're in together. We have Karen in. Hello, Karen.
Hey, Karen. I had to check this is a different one. This one's on the way. That's the support one. You can definitely have that done. Please note the shipping charge would apply. Okay, that sounds okay to me. So I will say yes to this.
So if you want, I guess everything that's available ship.
Yeah, I like this alternative. That they'll hold it and then they'll link it to a future order.
Okay, because you're gonna order.
Yeah. Okay, I'll respond later.
That sounds good. We have a bunch of stuff that have been stuck with Miniature Market for some time now.
For half a year.
For half a year. And trying to get them finally. So that's like pro tip, guys. So Toby ordered a mix of pre-order items and available items because it was one sale. So naturally you put everything in your cart. And then what's happened is that the pre-order items got delayed. So now everything got delayed in that particular order, and we were just waiting. So, and it's funny because Toby has made subsequent orders from Miniature Market since then,
and those
have already arrived. As in, they were shipped to the US PO box. They made it all the way here. We opened, we played them. So yeah, it's funny. But that's the risks of overseas ordering. It's like I'm getting a very big robot, Unicron, which I pre-ordered through the US side, and then it's shipped to my US address, gonna make its way here. And a bunch of people already have theirs when they ordered through Asia retailers, which is, I understand, that's okay. And they probably paid only a little more than I am paying in total to get it over here from the US. But then I'm not exactly in a rush. I still haven't mapped out where I'm gonna put it. So I think it's going to join us in bed. That's the only flat space available. Realistically, it's gonna be on my nightstand.
Yeah, I'm really wondering how to deal with all the other stuff.
I feel like we just I mean there's a need to let go of some stuff, which is always painful. But then I also feel like there's opportunity to optimize still, or like the bottom rack of this shelf is still a mix of things and it's not optimally used. Yeah, things.
How
Things.
to get rid of the other CDs, how to get rid of a lot of the movies. Um, Maybe finally give up on the printer. It's still a working scanner, but
I still want to get you a laser printer, but then it's like not as urgent without physical games happening.
yeah,
Because the main thing that Toby prints are RPG player sheets and the government
and
requirements.
some photos in the past which I couldn't continue lately,
Mm-mm.
which is sort of what the topic is all about. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah, I guess we can start. It is 9:08. Do you want to give it 2 more minutes?
No, let's just start. That's okay. We have at least Karen. I see that there are maybe 5 other people who are just not talking, so it's
Yeah,
okay.
please keep in mind we cannot say or tell who you are unless you comment, and please do comment. This show is an interactive one. We do react to people's comments, suggestions, and thoughts.
Or you can try to nudge us telepathically.
Let's start. This is Toby.
I said my part telepathically, and this is Rocky.
And if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy Pride, our little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
This is completely unscripted and not entirely accurate, but at least it's honest. Join us to talk about everything and anything random live.
And if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. This episode is episode 167, and we are talking about the lost art of photo albums. This was one of our original concepts.
Yeah, why did this come to you? You brought this up.
Because I realized that photos have taken such a drastic shift compared to how things are. I dare say that there are generations, there's at least one generation right now of people out there who never really had a physical photo. And I, for example, still have my old albums. I still have boxes with old photos. I actually still have a few negatives. And I realized these are, artifacts of an era, which makes me think back of how did you ever have that experience wherein you see those really old photos and you're like, it's all bubbling and stuff, the chemicals are like going bad, and it just makes you feel like, oh, they're so old. But now you realize normal photos would fall under that category as well.
And it's it's that sad sort of loss of it being a piece of physical media, and now it's like predominantly digital media. I mean, pros is like people now can take as many photos as they want. You're only limited by the storage capacity of your device. Whereas before, you had to make decisions in 12s. It's like you have 12 shots, 24, 36, 48. Think about it.
And then you might even, finish a roll, install a new roll of film, and then only later realize you installed it wrong.
Oh.
So all those photos were ruined. Or worse, you installed it right, it's fine, but then as you're winding to remove it, you do something wrong. And
okay. So there's like lots of terminology that we're going over here, and I feel like we need to do a brief, I don't know, history thing somehow in like the joys of consumer cameras. So even photo albums. So first, what is a photo album when it's not on Facebook? A photo album is like, I guess, the more conventional version that you see it now are scrapbooks, right? That people there are people who still do scrapbooks, which feels like a lot of work. But to be fair, there were people who put a lot of work into photo albums as well. I will say that there were like 2 main styles of photo albums. There was the ones that look like card sleeves that have distinct 3R slots. Oh, Toby's gonna bring out an album because he's curating the family albums here.
like these.
Ah,
See?
no. That's
So not
that's
this.
the
This
other
the,
example.
the other example.
No. Hi, Mitch. Mine is here. Tom's here.
Yes. There you
Yes.
go.
So where it has distinct cells, and it's like a lot easier to take the photos in and out. Oops, I'm gonna put it
Yeah.
back properly. Okay. But then the other type, which I feel was like super creative, is this one where it's a sticky sheet. It's a very well, not sticky anymore, but it was adhesive, and then you would position your photos in whatever position you
Mhm.
wanted, and sometimes you would add other things. I mean, like, what wedding photo album did not include a crushed flower from said wedding
Mhm.
or things like that, right? So there were like two major styles.
I
and
actually wonder if photo albums were the object that gave birth to the scrapbook.
Or I feel like the scrapbook came first, and then the photo album was the mass production way to make scrapbooking easy.
That's possible.
I feel.
Because
And
we look at photography historically.
oh dear, I triggered Toby by
So
saying history.
the first concepts of basic photography started as early as the 5th century. And it was not until much
We're
later.
really going that far back.
Yes, it was not until much later, around the 17th century, that actual cameras were started to be
You know what?
created.
What always is funny to me is that the 17th century means the 1600s,
Mhm.
and that always messes me up sometimes. Like,
Yes.
uh,
Now, photography as we know it, of course, that as we know it is still a loaded question.
there's
because
Mitch. Are we
digital,
defining things?
and
Yes,
then
we're
all
defining
that.
things.
Around 1830s, that's when Joseph Nipsey created the portable camera Obscura, which was the camera with a really tiny hole, and it would then cast the image, and it would then record the image that would not fade quickly. Because at that time, photographs were still temporary recordings, and they
Yes.
didn't like last
It's like a
forever.
temporary tattoo thing.
They went everything from the daguerreotype boxes, the emulsion plates, the wet plates, and sometime later, with the experiment of different chemicals, they started to have these plates that would capture the image at a longer degree of time. So earlier versions, including the daguerreotype ones, include copper plates that were coated with silver, hence the myth that vampires don't appear on photos
Yes.
because of the silver. Then there was, of course, the ones wherein the plate had to be exposed to the light for at least 15 minutes, which is why a lot of old photos, if you look at the really old ones, are like,
Yeah, and then it's that super like big flash bulb.
and they really had to maintain the face, and that's why they weren't smiling,
Yeah,
because it was
hurt.
exhausting. And eventually, from emulsion plates, it becomes the dry plates. The dry plates would have the gelatin plates that were, more capable of being stored and gave the photographers more usefulness. Shutters finally started to come in,
Oh my God.
and cameras started to become more than just certain people using them. So film comes in, and it was only in the 1880s that Kodak finally
Don't you miss Kodak?
makes it a major product for consumption. They make the self-contained box camera that had 100 film exposures, and at that time you would send the camera back, because the camera itself and the film was one thing. It wasn't yet the portable refill and all this.
Yeah. Which was that was a great industry.
It would not be until the late 1940s that the 35 millimeter film camera started to come in. And of course, around that time is when war happens. And with the advent of war is when a lot of technology either gets shut down or super boosted forward. And photography was one of those that got a boost in the war, because it was used for intelligence gathering.
Yes, for spy work, for checking out what you're gonna bomb.
So while the media, while media and news focus on cameras to capture the events for documentation, the military was using it to capture it for intelligence, for tactics and stratagems. And sometime later, Polaroids started to kick in as the next big thing for photographs because
Instant photo.
yeah, why waste time having the film processed and then having photos developed when the act of taking the photo can produce a photograph instantly. Um, it was quite a novel concept, but it did ingrain in us the mindset of, when we take a photo, it should be done.
Mm.
Because Polaroids, one, were expensive,
Yes.
and two, never lasted as long as normal photographs.
Yeah, because of the instant exposure effect, and who's ever like had to handle a Polaroid, and you have to do the shake and waiting for the
Yes.
photo to develop in the air. But then, yeah, and for the younger viewers out there, I mean, the original Instagram icon was trying to emulate a Polaroid style
Yes.
camera because that's distinct squarish blocky shape because it could also print out. My share is, of course, that Kodakan was a Filipino verb. Yes, that Kodak, because was so synonymous with photography, was the local term for taking a photo.
And of course, we can't talk about photography without talking about how deep the rabbit hole goes. For many of us, instant cameras were pretty much the norm. For the younger generations, digital cameras that were already built into phones were the norm. But for the more serious enthusiasts, you have the single lens reflex cameras or SLRs, which were those
Mitch says hindi Fujihan.
they were those scary cameras that were as heavy as a typewriter. And yes, some of you are even wondering what's a typewriter. But they were those really heavy cameras that have reflective mirrors
and interchangeable lenses,
which made them super expensive and also made them super fragile.
Which also oddly, like you remember, even up until the digital camera, like the personal
DSLR, digital.
No, not the DSLR, but just the consumer point and shoot cameras. That SLR type cameras were always banned at concerts. Like you could only be media if you were carrying an SLR.
Now, part of the reason of the banning was because for a period of time, film was the superior medium to capture imagery.
Yes.
Digital cameras were crap. Your high resolution cameras at that time will produce a photo that small. Or if it was blown up, it would be grainy, it would have all these artifacts. So it was there was the mindset in the past that if it isn't film, you'll have crappy quality.
Yeah, oh my god, you remember early digital cameras and super like because we had a lot of digital zoom, which was super blurry.
But at that time we were happy.
Yeah, but because wow, I can zoom so far, but it was like very
So concerts were against SLRs because of that, but then later on, as the digital camera started to get so much better, the point of bringing an SLR even was questionable now because your phone cameras have such a powerful lens for magnification and digital correction that there's no need for film cameras.
Okay, so let's pause because before we fully dive into the digital world, and let's get back to our core thing on photo albums. So I think most people's photo albums were populated predominantly by the family probably owned at least one camera, like one decent point and shoot camera that hopefully, in some cases was automatic. And when we say automatic, it means that after you load the cartridge of film, the camera would set itself. And then after every photo, it would automatically move to the next space on the negative. As opposed to manual cameras where you had to wind it.
Yeah, so there were two types. There was the wind, which was similar to a typewriter, wherein it was just the handle you push and it snaps back.
Yeah.
That winds the whole
I remember that, yeah.
But there was the wheel that you had to manually keep turning until you hear the click, because film had those little holes.
Yes, it was a notch thing like oh my God, like an old dot matrix form feed printer, which is another artifact of the ancient days. But yeah, and or at the very least, was this if you had more money to burn and you were traveling, you were probably willing to invest in an instant camera, which was a disposable camera that was good for maybe anywhere between 12 to 36 shots because there were some pretty heavy duty instant
And
stuff.
like a callback to the old cameras, you had to send the entire camera.
Yes, you had to bring it to the Photoshop.
To
Oh my
have it
gosh.
printed. Now, part of the experience of doing actual photos in the past was the acceptance that you will have to have a total stranger see the photos you took. Because when you have those photos developed, their job
Yeah,
was
what's
to
to process your photos?
process the negative. For each negative, print the photo, track which photos they printed, because when they then give it to you,
They have to audit.
they
Yeah.
can report if there were blank or bad shots because they have to show it wasn't them.
And by right, they will print out the bad
Yeah,
shots.
they will still print
It's
it
like
out, that's
all
true.
these overexposed things, and then the process was highly manual because they had to manually cut the photos.
Yes.
And you can tell because they were like depending on the photo studio that did it. Like if you ordered multiple copies of the same roll of film, you and that was like, ooh, you're splurging because you're gonna literally share physical copies of the photo with friends. They would never be cut the same way. Ooh, Mitch asked the important question: are we matte or glossy paper?
I was always mad.
Yeah,
I
same.
never liked glossy only because I always felt glossy interfered with the album.
That's true because then you'll layer it with plastic,
Mhm.
right? So the matte, I agree. I like the matte more.
So many have seen movies and have probably wondered, what's with that room with the red light?
And why are they not doing sex stuff?
Why are they doing stuff in that room for their pictures? I don't
Yeah.
understand. So there was a point in time in photography wherein in developing the photos you had to have them taken to what is called the dark room. And most are not aware of this because they, you know, have someone develop the photos for them.
Mm.
A dark room is literally a room that is dark because film, the film negative,
Before it's treated.
while it has not been chemically treated, is still going to capture any light that it feels, it touches. So when a camera is taken and the film is exposed to light that moment and then the shutter is closed, then it recorded that light. When then that film is taken out of the camera, and let's say by accident the bag was opened and stuff, then light shines on it again and it records that again. Hence the overexposed photos.
Or like those people when you accidentally pop open the back of your camera
Yes.
and you have an in progress reel, then no, you screwed
and
up
I'm
at
sorry,
least 3 photos.
I know people are like, "Nasaan ako kagad?" You're
No,
not
no, it's
faster
dead.
than light.
It's dead. It's
You're
dead.
not faster than the speed of light.
Mitch asked, why red light?
Now, when it comes to the dark room, you have three steps. You have the developing process, the stop bath, and then finally you have the fixing. The red light is not used in all three steps.
It's in the last.
During the development process and the stop bath, it is still risky to have light. Normally in the stop bath, there are some that might allow it depending on the depending on the technological point in time in photography.
Because there was a point, there was like a machine that they
Yeah.
could feed it
But
into. It.
speaking as someone who went through the process, because I was so happy to have gone through that in college. So when you get the film, you then have to develop it. So in darkness, you put the film on the tray, you put the developing chemicals, and then you have to rock it back and forth so it gets totally coated. And then once that's done, you wash that out, and then you wash that out, and this is the stop bath process wherein you cleanse it of all those really bad chemicals. And then that's when you leave it to hang to dry. And it's around that period that the red light kicks in. The red light is because you still want to minimize the possibilities of any portions of the negative that's still active to capture light. And red light being in the spectrum would have the least effect.
It's I forget if it's a shorter waveform or
Yes.
something.
So it has less of a chance of really affecting things. So even if, let's say, there's a lot of things in display, then the red light won't be as terrible as normal light.
Karen's here, amoy vinegar.
Yes.
So that was so there was that you would take all these photos on your reel from an event, and then you would go over to a Photoshop and order it done, and you get charged by the number of shots you've taken. The number of shots on the reel the capacity of the reel. So if you did a 12 shot thing,
Mhm.
then they'll price it already for the 12.
Yes,
And like,
regardless of whether or not the quality was good.
then you probably left a deposit, and then they'll give you that tiny slip of paper, which is the tab from the little envelope that they will later give you where they put the photos in. And in the early days, if they were fancy, they'd seal it. Later on, no.
And prior to the wash is the spiral thing, which was the trickiest part.
Mm.
It was this metal spiral, so it's roughly the diameter of the glass, wherein you had to load the film without touching it, only touching the sides. So you had to load it, and it would load up as Alvarez. It would load up in a spiral shape, so there's gaps between all the film.
Oh my god.
So you can then dip it in the chemicals, and both sides are washed at the same time.
Okay.
And that was terrible because so it had a metal spiral, and then by touch you're like locking and then rotating it in. But then as you're rotating, kung magdikit yung layer, wala
Bad.
na ano mo na yung chemicals nun. So it was such a rite of passage, and we used to do that in the dark room. There'd be a lot of us, and we're like, okay, spiraling, and then you could hear the shh, 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 shh. Then, okay, done na ako, and then the others are not thinking, yata, hindi ko magawa. Kasi tulungan kita, nasan ka? And it's that sort of thing. Some even you had the dark room, you had the red light in the distance, so that may konting ambient light. But then the area you work, may cortina pa. So your hands are in this curtained area.
Yeah.
So it was that sort of thing.
So there was a long process about it, but it was an amazing industry because then you would get your published photos, which means someone else has looked at all your photos already, and then you decide what you're going to do with them, and hence photo albums. And what was the point of a photo album? It's partly curation, right? It's that you want to organize, let's say, the photos from our trip to this or that country or whatnot. And then really there's always nostalgia. Like you can always turn back and look at it and decide, oh, let's revisit that vacation. Or you can use it, to share with people as they visit. And it was literally passing albums around and like, oh, take a look. And Toby has some because he's been digitizing.
So these are really old albums. Yeah, see, that's Mom. And look, see, that's Universal Studios.
I don't think she's going to want you to
Notice
share
the
this. I know your mom. She's going to be like, no, no.
And
she's
then,
not ready.
Yeah, there's that. See, those are our younger.
It's going up.
Yeah, it's not sticky anymore. But then it was
an experience. And then did you ever do we had albums like it had captions, and it was literally they'd handwrite captions on a slip of paper and then put it and things like that.
See,
and then I've had some with like very creative layouts. It's like crisscross. It's a collage thing, and that's kind of cool. For those growing up with photo albums, naturally there's like a lot of the albums that were cannibalized for school projects. Like I know I had borrowed on more than one occasion a photo or two, because bring a photo when you were a baby, bring a photo with your parents, and you forget to put it back, and then it kind of just becomes a loose photo. So that was the other function of photo albums.
You had the sad case of chemicals dying on the photos.
Yeah.
Like here you could see that weird chemical burn.
It's not a frame.
Or
it's
like here
chemical.
in the back of that. But then photos also allowed you to try to record keep things. So it's not that clear, but you could see here that the handwritten notes that these were taken in Lipa.
Or like, okay, and there were like two schools of thought, right? There were some who like would write the event on the back of the photo and like so that you know what it is. Others, when you had the fancy cameras later on, would have the date stamped in the corner.
Yes.
And that was like an advanced feature that you had to turn on. And you see that in some like Instagram filters and stuff that let you put the date on a photo, or some camera features allow you to do that. And then yeah, it's so cool. It was a thing. Karen was like, buti hindi dumikit yung photo. It depends on the album. Like you see some of them are really, really ruined.
Yeah,
Mitch was
actually,
like,
maraming nakadikit in
yeah.
the older albums.
Did you convert those photos digitally? We've been scanning.
Yes. And that's what's happening now. We're now living in an era where when you talk about photo albums, for many people, all
It's
they
Facebook.
know is, sa Facebook. Some would be a level higher than that, would go and go, Google Photos or yung dating photo bucket. You know, they're aware that there are specific albums. But then you have people who are more used to, let's say, Instagram and the like, um, which it also represents how there has been a shift in the thought of how photos are taken. In
Mm.
the past, a lot of it was just you record moments, but since you know you have a limited number of shots, it's you really reserve it for certain moments. It's not just taking photos of the birthday party, for example. It's the birthday cake moment
Yes.
and it's the group picture, diba? But then, as digital photography started to come in and become more common, and suddenly numbers didn't matter,
Yes.
it started to become a lot of these
Random
random
moments.
moments, casual shots,
Stolen
stolen
shots. Yeah.
shots. But then, as we enter the latter part of the digital age with Instagram and the like, it seems like we've jumped back to the earlier one where everything's composed and planned.
Mm.
But it's not to capture a moment, but rather to tell a story. And by telling a story, I mean you're inventing what you had for breakfast, or you are documenting it, but you're making it nicer and
You're styling
prettier.
it a bit. You're
Yeah.
positioning it to the
So,
best
so
angle.
it's an interesting thing how the concept of the album has really changed from a we have to document this moment and it's so hard to do it, so let's choose those moments very carefully.
With the no, with the classic. Sorry, can you take our photo? And there's no reassurance because it'll be like click. It's a very subtle click,
Mm-mm.
and then you don't know like, do I have to wind to the next shot, or
Mhm.
did the guy remember to wind it? Should he have turned the flash on? And we almost always took pictures with flash on for some reason.
And it used to be so scary to be asked to take a photo because the
Yes,
camera was expensive, and if you dropped it, oh my god. And
right.
then you don't know if you took it well because some
You won't
cameras,
find out until it's developed.
yes, and some cameras, um, you know, you might be used to using a certain camera, and then you're suddenly handed this other camera, and you're like, I don't know how to zoom with this, or I don't know if it's fine. And then when you see the photo, it comes out with a thumb on the picture. So
Did you ever curate a photo album on your own?
yes.
What did you put together? What was it for?
So I had albums, and at first my albums were trying to learn to just document stuff that I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
They were just containers. They were not
Stories.
specially prepared stories or anything because I had diaries for that.
Okay. Okay.
But later on, I kind of got tired of having them in albums because I kept updating. So I'd like
Um,
have pages of photos, but then not my friend anymore. Out. And then
oh.
I'll be annoyed as a whole. So I
Yeah,
have to
then you have
move
to move all the
everything.
photos, and you
And then
want to keep the sequence.
and then after doing that so many times, I just kept my photos in a box and I
Okay.
stopped. So I actually in the bedroom I have there a box. There's two albums that are partially filled, but then there's a box with all the photos
Mm.
because I really just got tired of doing it.
Yeah, Karen, or you ask someone to take the photo, you become paranoid the stranger might steal the camera.
Yes, and that has happened a few times.
Or the many attempts to take a photo on your by yourself with the timer. When the self timers, the first it was just the self timer,
Mm.
which was super unnerving because you just had a blinking light that would blink faster
Mm-mm.
than click.
Yes.
And then there was the fancier cameras later on that had the remote
yes.
that would trigger the timer and then still blink. I mean, you could trigger real time, but more often than not, to be safe, you still trigger timer because then it's a lot of like, eto na, and then people complaining, ang tagal, ang tagal, ang
But
tagal.
even prior to that, you had the two innovations that were mind blowing for me at the time.
Mm.
The first was autofocus.
Oh yes.
From using from using a single lens reflex camera, wherein I had to adjust aperture, shutter speed, and exposure levels before I took the shot. So I'm like, oh my god, am I doing this right? Click. I don't know. I'll find out next week.
Mm-mm.
To suddenly you half press, and then it's a
Yeah.
nice
The
focus.
half press to focus.
And then the second one was anti-red eye.
Oh,
Because the
oh
red eye thing
yes.
was such a freak out moment.
Because also nga, we were almost always taking pictures with the flash on.
Mm-mm.
Because because admittedly it really helped with film.
And if you think about it, the red eye phenomenon in cameras was that niche of a moment in the history of photography. Because prior to flash photography, that wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
But then with the sudden burst of a camera, that then illuminates the back of your retina,
Yeah.
and that causes that red eye moment to happen. Which there was that joking meme wherein, you
Yeah,
know,
Kino's like demonized.
yeah, there
Yes.
was a joking meme that, they'll show off photos with the red eye and they'll talk about how there was the demonic possession of the 1980s or something, because there's all these photos of people with demon
Mm-mm.
eyes.
Yeah, it's just a no. It's the reflection of the flash more often
Mm,
than not, and that's why you saw them more in high contrast, low light moments
mm-mm.
because it's darker. Then the flash illuminates, your eye dilates, and then captures more light.
And then some cameras were designed to delay the shutter, just enough time,
So that
so
your
that
eye adjusts back.
so by the time the light flashes, your retina's illuminated, so you can see the red part. But then the flash is done, so as that fades, that's when the shutter clicks. So it's that small enough moment that it looks like it took a picture instantaneously, but it still looked like it passed.
Admittedly, because okay, the physical photo age, I was at the tail end. I was still in school, so I didn't own
Hmm.
my own camera. I would borrow, and I took photos for certain events. And
Hmm.
then I never quite got around to making like an album, but I did. I know I had school projects, and I kept had to make me. I like in the first year we had what was it was called a folio, and we had to make a folio about a certain theme, and
Hmm.
I did a whole layout
Hmm.
curated album thing, and it was a good project. So there was that, and then but then kasi by the end of my school period, digital photography was starting to pick up, and it wasn't yet phone photography,
Hmm.
but it was digital cameras, and
Yes, the heavy,
the
bulky
heavy
ones.
ones that were they were particularly big because like my dad had a nice big Sony one where you could use floppy disks
Hmm.
as the film. But when he took them at higher resolution, it meant like maybe 4 to 6 photos per disc.
Yes, yes.
And then so he would bring this stack of floppy disks to
And if you are
events.
wondering, 4 to 6 photos per disc, because one disc was around,
One
um,
point ano, what was the capacity of that thing? Ayun, the Tom was like the red eye was another person flash having a preliminary flash for the wing flash. Yeah, it was
yes.
it was that reaction.
Hmm.
So so it was that crazy stuff. And then it's like, did you want to do the Sony memory stick? Oh my god, do you remember Sony's proprietary data thing? Which
Hmm.
would have higher capacity? Or do we just want the standard like floppy disk, which everybody had
Hmm.
anyway, and it was more plug and play? So it was in that point where we were starting to feel like, oh, you can take as many photos as you want, but you just have to make sure you have enough storage
And
media.
your problem was not storage so much as it was power,
Oh yeah, those
because
batteries drain
these
super
were
quick.
these were devices wherein rechargeable batteries were not yet the norm.
Or at least we didn't have the full high-powered lithium ion.
Yes,
Like,
and there were no energizers yet. So I remember a photographer would have just as many batteries as they would have as much film,
yes,
because even the digital camera photographers at that time would always still bring film cameras as backup,
yes, because
because you
at least
never
they would
know
work
when you
and
run out
they
of
last
power
longer.
and you still
Yeah.
need to take photos.
So it always amazed me, like at weddings, when you get your photo where your
They're
face
all
is stuck in a glass, like
mm,
you at the photos are taken throughout the night, and at the end of the night when you're leaving, there's that table with all the photos. Like,
mm.
oh my gosh, they printed these out really quick.
So a lot of that is thanks to the development of technology, as far as not just how photos are processed, but how the chemicals work.
Mm.
So, for example, for Polaroids, um, So as mentioned, in normal pictures, you take the camera, you take the photo, it's on the negative, you run it through these chemicals, you expose it to the photo paper, and then the image is printed. But then that paper, you still have to run it through chemicals so that it's right. That's why Polaroids go through the shaking and stripping process.
Yes.
A Polaroid photo still has wet chemicals, and you um, until you've exposed it to light, the shaking is to make sure the chemicals spread and mix properly. And then the stripping basically seals it in place, so to speak. So it was something like that. And with the advent of better understanding of how chemicals react and all this and that, we started to have um, ways to design things that reactions would be faster and more spread out. So in many ways, wedding photography, those with those outside tables are still kind of still drawing from Polaroid technology.
Yeah.
Which is why if you look at a lot of wedding souvenir photos, they don't last.
Yeah.
Heat eventually undoes them and destroys them.
Especially this heat in our tropical climate. And that's why I scan all these photos right away. And like I want copies just in case. I know we have a couple.
Yeah.
That reminds me, midway as the rise of digital cameras, and then we still didn't quite have phone cameras at a great capacity. I know I told you we're going to fully associate, but I think Mitch mentioned it earlier. There was the midway point of neoprint.
Oh my god.
Neoprint, which was the quirky digital camera booth.
Yes.
Oh my god, it's not a camera booth. Digital camera booth that would allow you to use, you could choose photo frames and stuff, and then you would come up with a sticker sheet of your photos, which you could then immediately apply to customize your stuff. And in the school period, it predominantly would go on the back of your ID or something, so that on your ID you had all your neoprints with your friends. And it was an instant camera experience. We were using digital cameras already as a booth, but it was like funnier because you could put stickers and whatnot, which is funny now when you look at a lot of like what gets done in
events and weddings,
or like stories, photos, and the like. I mean, like when we put stickers, filters, gifs, but it's like that neoprint experience.
If you think about it, so you had wedding photography or event photography, but then because of malls and eventually arcades that adopted it, you had those neoprint booths that allowed you to personalize things. People started wanting that in their weddings.
Yes.
That in their events.
The photo booth at the wedding.
So it's funny how that has evolved in that way.
So mine's like the sticker and cutesy version of the photo ID booth. Don't you miss those photo ID booths? It was the classic, like I need photos for my passport, I need photos for whatever. They were technically automatic machines, but because this is the Philippines, there was always an operator that you had to talk to. To deal because you would have to order what photos you want, and later that became more and more complicated. Like, do you need passport? Do you need US visa? They could cut it depending on the size. But I felt like they were less for funny photos and more for professional photos.
So Karen asks, I wonder why di pumatok siya compared to Japan. I think it did,
but it was
popular,
like,
but I think how do I put this? Because in my youth, it was very popular. Lots of kids were really
it's like
doing
I
it.
remember it in my school years.
But then, I think for the kids after my generation, digital cameras were starting to become a little bit more accessible.
Yeah.
So neoprint
only
booths
lasted
were
so
no
long.
longer as popular.
Because neoprint, where would you have to go? Typically, they were at arcades, which was weird, or certain shops. They would like get a neo. I think I used to go to one at National Bookstore or something.
And then there was that added detail of most were tied to Hello Kitty and the like.
Yeah,
So it had a very
they look very feminine.
Yeah, so a lot of guys wouldn't be that into it. A lot of girls would find it a little bit more accessible than guys. So there was that angle too.
And you had those friends who were like super proud of how many people they could cram into a neoprint photo.
Yes.
And then you would have like 12 people like huddled in the booth.
Yes.
Like, it's crazy. I think I still see some of those things around in arcades, but it's not like what it used to be. Because again, everybody can do it on their phones now. Okay, so it's kind of I kind of miss that. I know at home we have a bunch of albums. We have a lot of loose photos from events. And then I keep wanting to take a trip back to the family house, get the photos, which I don't even know if they're alive anymore, and then just scan everything, which Toby has been doing for his family.
So talking about scanning,
Yeah.
I was very old school and I still used a scanner, but not the older old school scanners, which were the handheld scary devices.
Oh
Oh
my
my God,
God.
you remember those?
Yes, and they were about just a little bigger than a 3R photo.
And I remember I used to use a steel ruler, so and I or my T square in drafting. So when I scan, I push it against it to keep it in a straight line.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, there were those
We
scanners
got to
before.
have an episode where you said you had a T square.
Of course, I was doon pa sa Makati, I did drafting. But then now digital scanning of photos is so much easier because there are apps that allow you to do that. What's the one you always use?
I use PhotoScan from Google, but I know like for documents, I still use Cam Scanner, which is free. I know there are friends who swear by Microsoft scanning thing.
And this just reminds you that the photographic capacities of your phone are years ahead of where film cameras were before.
Man, but I remember that turtle scanner thing because it looked like a giant mouse,
Mhm.
right? It was like always like a white
Or like a paintbrush
or it's
minus
like
the brush.
or it's the end of a vacuum, you know.
Yes,
and then
yes.
you super had to like roll it slowly over the photo.
Because if you did it too fast,
Or if you tilt it, then your photo gets wonky.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god, oh my god. So now it's so much easier to scam. But then it's just a question of taking the time and wondering if your photos are still alive.
So some apps basically have you follow a grid on the screen and you take the photo. Others, the one for the documents will show points because it takes multiple photos and then digitally
My photo
stitches it
scan,
together.
yeah, my photo scan does the points. Cam scanner actually it's just instant,
Yeah.
and then it it adjusts, distorts, and then enhances. But
Yeah.
it works best against for paper. It's
Yeah.
like good for cam scanner is great for documents.
And then I
Isn't
know there are hardware devices wherein you can literally feed your photos and in some your negatives. So that will scan it. They're super
I
expensive.
know
though.
now, or I know, like I feel like just there are photography studio things at the mall that now offer like you
Yeah.
can give your photos for digitization.
Because they have to survive.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that they're still alive, but then yeah, considering that they also still like you can actually get your digital photos printed in traditional film media and like ooh that's a thing because there's still people kind of do it but most of us don't. Okay, so midway I think like we went through like certain periods of digital photography creation, and then I feel like there was more of an effort to mirror the photo album experience, and I think this is best illustrated by the likes of Multiply, because Multiply as a social network, its main claim to fame was unlimited photo storage. And it really got people into the discipline of creating albums of their events and, sharing that and instantly sharing that with friends. It is not significantly different from what Facebook does now. But then, yeah, I think that the whole treatment towards photography post Instagram has changed, and now people capture more moments than events. I don't know. That's just my personal speculation. But that's how Toby and I met, because I posted all these photos I took at an event at the convention, and then he says, "Hey, that's me." We're beginning a long history of Toby just saying it's me. But that's how we met, and then because I made the album public, and then he could comment, and that's how that was our first actual online interaction.
And if we think about how the technological evolution of photography has progressed, we now have what? So we have cameras that are able to take what we call 360 photos, which by themselves are not really useful, but in the right place, like let's say in Facebook or you're able to have the photo be presented in a way that the person viewing can look around and view it from all the angles they want. You have 3D photos, which basically Facebook has also been utilizing a lot. Wherein As you
It adds a
scroll,
weird
as you
parallax.
scroll, there's that parallax effect that makes the photos more interesting.
And it's gotten so much easier. When it first launched, you had to upload a
Mm-hmm.
photo and a 3D map thing that would identify the layers.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just like a lot of the especially Apple, they built it into their thing that you can take 3D photos. And then
Yeah.
Facebook has like retconned around it.
My shares that there are stories, which are photos that self-destruct after 24 hours. This ranges everything from Snapchat with the snaps to
So formally in
fleets.
my digital marketing world, we call this ephemeral content.
Yes.
And as early as 2018, 2019, they were already saying that ephemeral content is king. That's where Facebook was putting a lot of focus on, and
Mhm.
that's why Instagram has stories, Facebook has stories, everybody has freaking stories. And it's funny that we all call them stories when really Snapchat was first.
Yes.
And
Snaps came
then
first.
they were snaps, but then now they're not. There's Snapchat still alive, but come on, seriously, who's going to go to a platform just for ephemeral content?
And ultimately the trend has been to make everything smaller and faster to consume, which is why from intense blog pages people have been shrinking and shrinking to
Just
tweets.
social posts and stuff. Yeah.
And then same as with from galleries and albums, people are starting to go to Instagram posts and
Ephemeral content.
ephemeral content, which is
I say it for work a
you,
lot.
you see
obviously.
it, you consume it, you don't want to see it anymore because you've seen it already.
And it's like funny, like, and I've spoken to people about because it's a thing that we talk about.
Mhm.
It's like why do because there are people who do stories and then also post them as photos. Some who only certain things are photos on the feed, some are stories. And then the logic that people share with me, and I kind of get it though, is that they don't want to clutter their feed with too many updates.
Mhm.
So story, that's why normally you see people are willing to blast stories with a gazillion photos. Whereas on the feed, they're not as liberal with what they're posting, which is funny that it's that curation thought. But it's also, when you think about this whole discussion about albums, it's because people share photos individually and not necessarily as albums anymore.
Mhm.
And I can be a little old school in that regard that I still organize my stuff into albums.
Well, I think that's also partly based on the purpose of the person
That's
creating the
true.
content, because there's content creation for a lack of a better word, as a business. So you want the content to always be fresh.
Mhm.
But then there's the creation of the content for storage because you want to reconnect with it to
Yeah.
enhance the
Ultimately,
albums.
I'm documenting.
And a lot of the galleries out there aren't really albums. They're content,
Mm.
and they're meant to be they're meant to be always fresh. So you will want to get rid of the old stuff. In fact, for many, they would rather you never saw their old stuff because
Yeah.
they do reinvent themselves, they do change their styles, and whatever look they had before, they don't want to see that anymore.
I mean, like, I know there are people who actually reboot their photo feeds periodically, especially Instagram. I know people who clear the feed entirely and then they'll start, and then they only want it, they want to do grids. And when I say grids, this is our industry term for like when you do multiple photos that when viewed together form a larger image like a mosaic.
Mhm.
But then when you look at the individual photos in your Instagram feed,
They
I
might-
don't get it because I'm
they
looking
don't
at a
make
foot,
sense.
But it's a thing. But that's already old hat. Okay, if you're working with a company and they're like their novel social media idea for your
Their
Instagram feed
genius ideas
is to make a grid. Oh my god, that is so 3 years ago. So all right, Tom is like, since you mentioned digitizing old photos, there are also stores that allow you to make your own printed and book bound photo albums. Yeah, the scrapbook experience has gotten a lot better.
So that is not a new thing.
Yeah.
In the States, there were places like Kinko's and the like, which allowed you to do that. In the Philippines, your mileage will vary because a lot of them were small scale publishers or printers that normally do tarpaulins and the like in yearbooks.
But now, but now at the studio level,
Yes.
because they have templates and
Yes,
stuff.
now there are those as well.
Okay, personally, so my photo journey is that when I started taking more photos, initially I embraced Picasa. So there was a time when Google was in the early Google days and they were acquiring different companies. I tested out almost every single Google associated application,
Mhm.
and one of them was Picasa. And Picasa, as a as a piece of software was free. And what it did when you first installed it is that it scanned your entire computer
Mm-hmm.
and then identified all the photos, confirms which folders you want to add,
Mm-hmm.
and then it would just give you the steady feed, and then you could easily turn them into
Because
group them
at,
into albums.
because at that time the philosophy was it's your computer. Of course you want it to look for everything in there.
Yeah, and because it was tied to like Google's mission of making all information
Readily accessible.
accessible, usable, and
indexed.
searchable.
Yes.
So that's what Picasso was doing for photos in the beginning. And
Mhm.
then it was such a novelty for me because then like I would take, and I didn't take as many photos at the time, but when I take photos, we go out and then I get home, I save them to my hard drive.
Mhm.
They get grouped. They get added to my feed. I could group them into an album. I can start tagging people, labeling it. Like, oh, I like this experience, and that got me excited. And then they eventually launched Picasa web albums, where I could curate the albums on my desktop, and then it syncs to the cloud, and then it could create the albums.
Mhm.
It sync, and then I could share those albums with friends. So that got me started in sharing my stuff on Picasa directly, and not necessarily on other platforms. There was a time that it would let me cross post to Multiply, and that was a bit of an effort. Or there was times I could cross post to Facebook through complicated means, and I used to do that. So there was a time I used to have a lot of stuff to Facebook.
Mhm.
Eventually, the Picasa brand went away, and this is what became Google Photos.
Mhm.
And that's why I never kind of went away from it. And then when Google Photos adapted into a mobile experience, where hence the behavior is the same. When you get Google Photos, it scans your entire phone and
Yeah.
then identifies all your photos and determines what they are and then tries to back them up.
But at least now they're smart enough to recognize photos because they're searching for metadata. Because in the past, I remember.
They were used to get file extensions.
Yeah, you'd see assets of certain software also appearing. And you're like,
Album covers from
why
your
are
music
these being
folder.
pulled? I don't want this.
Yeah, there was like random JPEGs from inside games.
Because back then, it will just search for images.
Yes.
It didn't really distinguish it.
So, and that's why I grew up with this experience. I grew up with Picasa to Google Photos, to Picasa web albums and Google Photos, and that's why I super embrace it. And then, and that's why like there are a lot of like these internet meme games on like Twitter where they're like post a photo from your phone of whatever or get the fifth photo on your phone that does this. I barely keep photos on my phone because Google Photos, whenever I'm connected, is backing them up. And then once all the photos are backed up, I delete them from my phone.
I, on the other hand, rarely take photos. So if I were to participate in those things, it would probably be screenshots of receipts and payments, or the occasional attempt for me to take photos of myself because I am trying to be more active in taking photos, but I don't really. I mean, you can look at my Facebook and how often I've changed my profile picture.
I guess the flip side though is that although I'm still curating my stuff into albums, I don't share them as much as I used to. So like I would definitely share my OBAR photos because number one, I want to make sure that the ODivas have access to the photos. So I have to share them and tag them and make sure it's publicly accessible. And then if there were other friends present at that night when we were at OBAR, then I would want to share that. But then admittedly, even things like when we hang out with friends for board games, I take photos during the night, but then I don't necessarily share the album with them.
And if ever, you'll take photos of the game.
Yeah.
And then maybe one or two photos of us.
Because I'm also very shy
Yeah.
about taking photos.
And we're not, we're not the type of people who, as the event unfolds, we just take photos of people. I know I used to be that with a film camera because the idea was, I can afford the film, so guys, don't worry, I'll take photos. And then we'll look at it and, oh my God, remember this?
Yes.
But with the advent of digital cameras and photos no longer being something only certain people could afford to do as a luxury, I suddenly just pulled back because I didn't feel like I wanted to be the person who kept taking photos of people during an event. And it reached a point that as we now have guests, well, prior to pandemic, as we would have guests and stuff, I don't even bother about taking photos. I just enjoy that we're with our friends. So it has that.
And there's
It's
that
made that weird switch.
and there's that flip side also that you have friends naman who try to curate other people's photos in the sense that if you take their photo, they'll be like, "Can I see?" And then they want to vote on whether or not to keep it.
Or can we take another ibang angle and ganyan. So it has become a very different culture when it
Yeah.
comes to how photos are
Whereas
taken.
before you deal with the photo as is, as it's captured, and that's why I tease Nico anak about this all the time because I know that he's rarely happy with my first photo. I know there's a look on his face that whenever I take photos, I know he's not happy. We'll take another one, but then of course he's like, but then you post all of them, and like, yeah, I'm not just going to post the best. I'm gonna
Mhm.
post all.
There, Karen mentions we hardly take photos during
Actually, I
FGTC.
take a number.
Yeah, but you don't really take of people.
Not
Not
so
so much
much.
anymore. Now you try to. Well, prior to pandemic, you
I try,
actively try
but
to.
again, I'm very shy about it because
Mhm.
again, because I know, because now my assumption is, people aren't always comfy with stolen shots.
Yes.
And then there's like after I take them, I don't necessarily share them with everyone unless like there's a birthday thing, and then like I share photos of
They might want
of
to
the cake and
copy.
stuff, and then the group shots. But then like it's just weird, no? So like I have and then I don't want to risk showing my Google Photos, but then my Google Photo thing is like I have so many albums. I have so many albums of my stuff, and then I even because I was like not sure what to do when I take daily stuff. Like I take pictures of lunch, I take pictures when I work out, all these things on the back end, I curate them into albums by month.
Mhm.
And then I just call them like November Geek Moments, October Geek
Mhm.
Moments. So I still curate all the photos I take so that if I need to find something, there's a bigger chance that I
Mhm.
can find it. And then admittedly our FGTC nights, if if I did take photos, especially like I like taking wide shots of people playing, I can find them and it's I don't know. I
Mhm.
just never know if I want to share them or not. And it's funny. It's and I guess there was a time that I posted everything on Facebook as albums also. But then there's that weird like, especially once you get to like a few hundred friends on Facebook, then you have random people commenting and like, did I really want this family member to comment on this photo
Mhm.
and things like that? And so that's another thing
I
that the sharing of stuff, you're also inviting comment. Then you're like, am I gonna take the time to limit
Mhm.
visibility of this photo album
Yeah.
or what?
For me, a large part of why I really stopped was I didn't want to update. And um, so there's a lot of people who get together, but months or years down the line, move apart.
Mm,
But then you might have albums that still have them together. And more often than not, there might be albums where they're super sweet together.
yeah.
And for a time, I would just try to remove the photos. But then it started to feel like a chore to keep track of all this. Um, Especially when you have cases wherein, let's say, you have a friend who used to have blah as ex, but then a few years down the line has blah as a different ex now. And then a few years down the line, oh, may asawa na siya. But then you have the photos of magkasama pa with ex. And then sometimes friends of ex will mention, uy, sino yan? Ang cute. So there's that sudden weird, wait lang.
That's true. Because again, the digital photo album, especially on social media, doesn't quite feel like the physical photo album in your house.
Wherein you
You
can choose
control
when
who
to
you
share it.
show it.
Yes.
Whereas if you leave it up in your feed and it's visible to at least all your friends, what more if it's visible to the public?
Mm.
Then anybody can look at it, and then it gets weird. So I know, like when we became more and more privacy conscious. I know
Mm.
I locked all my photo albums by default to
Yeah,
friends only,
same. I mean,
and then I
at
never
first it
bothered.
was fine because when we first started, well, at least when I first started on Facebook, I knew specifically everyone I added.
Yeah,
But as the years progressed,
work networks,
yes,
people you meet at events.
in my case, with the talks and stuff, there were
Yeah.
people adding me who I
You have
didn't know of.
students who have added you.
When I started releasing games, there were people who added me because they liked my games at nahiya naman ako to turn them down. What?
And like other game designers that you've made
That's
friends
different.
with.
That's me adding them.
But still,
See,
it's like now
I'm the
you're
weirdo.
connected. You're the oh,
I'm the weirdo connecting to them in those
Matt
games.
Leacock,
Stop.
Yui
Will you please stop?
Rosenberg.
They might react and think I'm like boasting. I know them.
No, no, but I'm just like, wow, they accepted your friend request.
Okay, going back. David Mack accepted also. Going back. Um, wait. Stop.
Shouldn't I be concerned?
Well, you were getting out with Jim Pinto. Okay, going back. So as more people started to add, um, so there was that realization that there were some friends and who were in different situations now, and more so with friends who, let's say, I have friends who were bi,
Mm.
but they aren't openly bi.
Yeah.
So they had boyfriends, but then now they're married.
Mm.
And then the pictures with the boyfriends, I now feel like I have to hunt them down and not make them visible out of respect.
That's true.
Diba? And then there were also cases of, what was this? Nawala ako sa isa. When you have people going through your old albums, so your notifications are all blank like, blank like, blank like, blank like, and you're like, why is this suddenly getting popular again? And then people out of nowhere commenting on things, and I suddenly freak out because I don't know if I have to be the one to explain things and stuff like that. So I kind of
It's fair. So it's like every year, wow, except for like this year, but like for most years, every year I curate an Obar Nights album. And my Obar Nights album is only visible to people in the Obar family group I've created, which consists of people who have gone to Obar with us. That's basically it. So I know that it's people that I can like trust to see it. So obviously it's not visible to like my general family. It's not visible to like people I've worked with and things like that. So there's things like that. And then so that when I reshare those photos of the night, and I don't even share all. I share mainly the photos that were together. And then that's the overnight. And then the Google Photos album of the night, I also eventually share a link to, and I still limit it to like just Obar people, and then I just tag the performers so that they can look for their photos. But it's that weird like it's very careful selective sharing because you're
Yeah.
worried about it getting too widespread. Or I mean, I'm not worried about what they'll see of what I'm doing. I'm just more worried about there are people who may not want to be seen in these photos, who may
Yes.
not want to be associated with it.
I've had moments like that where in the past I take photos of events, and then there was a time when one person super got angry at me for not asking permission to take photos of that person.
Yeah, everybody
And-
has different,
and
a different level of
And
comfort.
at that time, I didn't understand, and I was just so pissed off why that person was like that. But it was only later on I realized, there is that level of maturity of respecting people's personal space as well and privacy, and not just showing every photos. Which is why I always get freaked out sometimes when you have people who are like um, super sharing photos of certain, let's say, parties and stuff, and
During the
it's,
pandemic.
it's literally strangers, but the photos are still being shared because they're finding it amusing and stuff.
Oh yeah,
And-
when people like share other people's events.
So
I'm
there's
like,
that.
ooh.
I don't know. I don't know if this is right, but again, it might be the old school me talking. And then finally, you have the albums that are used as a catharsis. Um, some some do this as alter accounts. Others do this as rant accounts. I like someone will have a Twitter account where they just get to complain about work and this and that, but they'll never connect it to themselves. And they sometimes even have albums there of their own stuff because they want to still express themselves in a certain way. Because photography now has become pretty much synonymous to posts. A picture you post tells a story or tells a message you want to say. In my case, I'm still more used to grabbing images. I'm not.
Hey, that's me.
I'm still trying to learn to actually, do photos as what I want to say, but I don't know. I'm not comfy doing it, even if I keep trying to.
So it's just funny that like, so I'm like the super photo taker, and
Mhm.
then ayun nga, then as I switched from point and shoot cameras to my phone now, yeah, I take a lot of photos.
Mhm.
I take a crazy amount of photos, and I like, and I've reached that point where I like documenting things at random, or like when I'm walking on errands now, especially like during this pandemic, then I'll be like, "Ooh, that looks weird." And I'll take a picture of like empty streets and this fire tree that I really
Now,
like.
one thing which I always found interesting was despite the fact that one, we do love photos,
Mm-hmm.
and two, we are now literally living in a world where we could buy devices that can showcase our photos.
Yeah,
A majority still do not utilize both. I mean, us, the closest is we have your photo album on rotate on our TV
yeah,
as a screensaver, so to speak. So it's sort of like we have an album that's showcasing stuff.
yes.
But I know in the past we discussed how maybe old tablets we can repurpose them to have photos and we'll just leave them on
Because they're literally
the
like,
shelves.
you ever considered, I know we considered before like as giving us gifts, like there were literally these digital photo frames, which is basically a low power tablet with a
With a
USB
memory,
port.
yes.
Yeah, or then you just copy the photos and then it cycles for you.
Yeah.
And it never really caught on,
But
you know.
despite the fact that it's a readily available technology,
Yeah.
you'd think, given how in all sci-fi stuff we would see, look, there's holograms of their photos around, di ba?
The behavior
Where
is
we
different.
aren't really choosing to do that. We aren't really choosing to have these digital displays. And even if you say, you have people who do that in Instagram stuff, why aren't they having a large screen in their house that's showing their latest Instagram posts?
Hmm.
It really
Although you
has
could
that,
this.
diba? But you could see there's that distinct, we aren't doing that with photos compared to how, if we look back, that's what paintings were.
Yeah.
People wanted to have permanent images that they could adorn their walls with. And this still did carry to modern day, well, not modern day, but to the earlier years of, you remember when houses were filled with framed photos on the walls?
Mm-hmm.
Diba? These were family photos, these were solo
When we
photos.
visit your mom, the house is still
Yeah.
like so
and
many
and
photos.
it's really a generational gap in that. In our
And those
case,
wood-mounted graduation
yeah,
photos.
I sort of still have that now with our little printer photos that I wanted to still adorn some of our shelves.
Yeah.
But we never really have progressed to the point of embracing digital in that way.
Of turning it back into a physical medium.
Yeah, like having some tablets on corners of the house that are showing certain albums. Partly because maybe it's too much hassle to choose what photos to place there. Hassle to think about recharging the devices,
Yeah.
and hassles of updating them to other photos you'd rather show later on. Because now we take so many.
Yeah. It's the sheer volume. And then like I mean like Toby, it's always cringy when I hear Toby in GRO mode at Obar. I'm taking photos, and then I can hear him talking to some new person at the table again. And then he'll be like, "Oh, you see, Rocky, he literally takes thousands of photos every
Because
night."
you do. I still distinctly remember the night we checked and you were like at 5,000.
Yeah.
There was a night you were at 5,000. And then you were like, we'll have to edit, we'll have to reduce. And then, oh, ilan na? 3. Di
To be
ba?
fair, I was bursting more kasi instead of taking video because
Yeah.
video was still too big.
But
But now I take more video.
but that is a literal number.
Yeah, yeah. It's just funny. I hear it every
Okay,
time.
let me just try
Don't,
something.
don't.
What?
What
do
are
you
you
think I'm
doing?
gonna
No,
do?
no, no, right now.
Okay, wait.
Right now, right now,
We
right now.
go to over at what time?
Around midnight.
Okay, so midnight, then we'll leave it around.
Let's say 4.
So that's 4 hours. So if it was 5,000
I don't
photos,
do 5,000 on average anymore.
so that's around 1,250 photos an hour. All right.
So now you can say it's about 3,000 a night on average. Let's say.
So let's say it's 3,000. So we're looking at 750
That's not so bad.
photos an hour. So that's still around 12 photos a minute.
Because Obar photography for me is not regular photography.
So we're looking at point 0.2 photos per second.
Because the bulk of the photos are performances. And if you're
Yes,
taking photos of motion, then you want to
of
capture
course, but
moments.
still, to put it into
Yeah.
context, at point 0.2 photos per second, so so we're looking at what, a photo every 5 seconds.
And okay, and then the I'll admit the funny thing now with my phone, I don't they're not even burst shots. I'm clicking. I'm clicking manually. Or I could be taking video and taking photos during the video. Have you ever tried that? It's an amazing feature that you can already take stills during the video.
I'm just happy that Rocky has adjusted to using his phone, because it used to
Oh
be
my god.
camera, and then while taking with the camera, pulls out phone, takes other photos with
No, I was
phone,
taking video with my camera,
and
with my
then
phone.
uploading while still taking pictures of camera. And while this is happening, I'd be like, and then we're like, oh,
You're moving me. Now I just have to deal with Toby going woo at the beginning of every video of a number that we like.
okay. So that's okay. Talking about technology. So there's the take video while taking photos, or was it the other way around?
Take photos while taking
Okay,
video.
so that's one of the technologies we super love now. There was auto zoom. There was anti red eye. There's autofocus. What was the other one we're in? When you take a photo, it like takes a few seconds. So it like there's that animation, then it freezes to a photo.
Oh, I forgot what they call them. They call them like live photos. Or
Yeah. I
whatnot.
think
And
it's
then
live
it's like
photos.
then it's like you're drifting.
So like
Then you look like you're from Hogwarts.
so like when you're all like going to okay, picture on three, 1, 2, 3, then the photo goes. Because there's that brief.
Yeah, it captured the no.
I don't know if that lasted.
It's still a feature. It's a feature on phones,
But is it just on the phone? Because you can't like export that to Facebook.
it's exported as a video. It takes a video file of the thing,
Okay.
and then you can choose moments, and that's where there's those weird on your I don't know depending on the phone that you have where you can like go through the motion and choose which moment to make into the frame.
And then others, remember the time when everyone would do the
Panorama.
yeah.
I love panoramas, but I like panoramas for landscapes.
And it was nice how there was that digital graphic that you were showing what you were creating.
And I've done that, but now panoramas are useful because you can turn them into 180 or 360 images in
Yes.
Facebook, and then those are the ones that become tilt and pan.
Mhm.
Which before they would just be this really long image because I took it's normally like I'm at Taal or something, and you know.
Tom just mentioned, speaking of paintings, there's the talk of Vermeer and his contemporaries that use camera obscura. Yes, definitely. One of the technologies that I wanted to bring up now was one that came out recently. So Adobe Photoshop now has something called super resolution.
Oh yeah, Toby freaked out about
So
it.
it's this ability to enhance low resolution images. It basically allows you to digitally bump them up. And this has been one of the holy grails as far as graphic design is concerned. This again connects to if it wasn't taken on film,
It was never in the same
basura
way.
yung photo na yan.
In digital, it's if you didn't take it at 5 megapixel,
Yeah.
you can't turn it. You can't turn a 1 megapixel photo into a 5 megapixel.
And bear in
photo.
mind, there was a point in time where a megapixel photo was unheard of. You
Yes.
needed specific devices to take photos of that quality. Now all the phones pretty much take photos in that level. But there was a time that I remember we were going to work on posters and stuff, and we're like, oh, sige, we need the photos of ganyan, and then they'll email these JPEGs. And we're looking at them, and
You
we're
can't
like,
make a poster or make a tarpaulin like this.
now, back then, and this was back in ABS-CBN, Beth and Joey were amazing in that. No. It was Beth's friend who was a photographer. And then with Joey and Beth, they made this action script that you'd run it on a digital photo. So it would blow it up by like a very small amount, and then blur, sharpen, blur, and then blow it up, blur, sharpen,
Oh
blur.
wow!
And
So it's slowly trying to grow in.
it worked. We were able to use that to to bump up a lot of really bad quality photos, and it worked to the point that we were able to use them for billboards.
Commercial break though. Remember though that the workaround for carrying large files around were zip drives.
Yeah.
And when we say zip drives, I don't mean you zipped a file. It was a specific device
It
that
was a very big diskette.
yeah, but it had a reader
Yes.
and then the digital media and then but it was higher capacity
Yes.
and like every
It
designer
was the
who was
professional
the
way.
shit was like you would carry these around.
It was the professional way to carry files around because it was faster than a
It was bigger than diskettes.
yeah, and
It
it
wasn't as
was
hard as burning a CD,
yes.
and there was no portable hard drives
And
yet.
well, there were naman, but they weren't of that level of capacity.
Yeah.
And the last thing was they were more stable than hard drives,
Yes.
so you could carry them around. You had you had those nice cases where you could slip them in. Anyway, going back
Zip
to
drive.
super resolution on Adobe Photoshop.
Yes.
So it now allows you to bump up photos, and it's scary. If you look online for some of the images now, you have them bumping up photos tremendously. Like there's a 12 MP image, all the way up to a 8,500 by 5,000 pixel image, and it's scary how sharp the image still is. You would actually think it was taken that way ever since. The upsize capacity of these things are crazy.
Okay. Funny thing I'll admit
Mhm.
about when I take photos, and I still wonder about this, is that naturally our phones now are longer, right? So they are essentially they're taking them in 16:9 ratio, which is
Mhm.
HD, HD video. I forced my phone camera to take photos in 4:3. So they're still taking them in the same aspect ratio as a
Mhm.
classic 3R photo.
Mhm.
I don't know why. I can't seem to get away from it. So when you do see I have photos in 16:9, these were photos taken during a video.
So it's like Snyder cut albums.
Something like that. So my photos are more rectangular,
Mhm.
more squarish than full stretched rectangular. And I cannot explain to you why I do this, you know. And it's funny because nga, it's like when I take the photo and then when I post it on social media, then I have to compensate.
Resize and
Yeah.
trim
It's
or
like
crop.
so like when I post stuff on Instagram stories, for example, since it's not the same, it's not the HD dimensions, then it's cut off on the top and the bottom.
Mhm.
It's like I have this cropped area, but I don't know. I just feel comfy with the size, and then I think that speaks to me still wanting to take like photos, which is and they're all photos, but you know what I mean, like physical
Yeah.
photos.
Karen asks before ba yan
Ng
NGC?
CDR. Yeah, I mean like the zip drives
Um,
people were burning to CDs,
yeah.
but if you needed to just transfer, especially Photoshop files, oh my god.
Burning was present but still expensive.
Yes.
It wasn't yet common. Um, konti pa lang ang pirated burnable CDs.
Yeah, and then wala pa masyado yung reburnables.
And it was mostly pa CDs, hindi pa masyado Blu-rays.
Hindi pa DVD.
DVDs, hindi pa pala DVDs.
Yeah.
So it was still a smaller capacity. Hence, zip drives were still the thing.
Zip drives, and later on, like then there was remember things like Firewire, which is like that effort to like make it fast. You could so okay, maybe you're not gonna bring a zip drive, you bring your laptop, but you want to be able to quickly transfer it from the laptop to another computer, then you get Firewire. It's like because it was trying to beat USB at the time.
All those attempts are of different cables.
It's so funny. It's so funny. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like, okay, we've been at this for a very long time because it became also a discussion of camera nostalgia, which I expected. But so and I feel that sort of transition in the way that the reasons why we take photos and
Mhm.
because of convenience, there's so more ways to take it. But then at when we are at events, like little events, even just our game nights, I do try to. I still have an attention to trying to document
Mhm.
uh, experiences. I'm very shy about documenting people because then it falls back in that trap of do I want to get permission? Do I want to bother them? Because admittedly, when I was still taking film photos, I do love candid shots. I do love catching people in
Mm-hmm.
moments. And and I wouldn't say I was artsy by any means, but it was just convenient. And admittedly, I think I mentioned it before in our blog post somewhere. Like
Mm-hmm.
initially, cameras for me were like a replacement for being social
Mm-hmm.
because, especially at parties or school events, like I don't want to bother talking to people. I'm like very awkward in the social situations. But if you lift your camera up, people run to you
Mm-hmm.
and they gather, and you just have to take their photo. And the most you're gonna say is 1, 2, 3, and then you're done.
But you feel like you've interacted.
I feel like I interacted, or at least they think I interacted, because I don't want to pretend to interact. But there was that social touch point,
Mm-hmm.
and that's sort of like what started with me in cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And then when digital cameras came along, same thing at Obar nights. That there are a bunch of people like, hey, we haven't taken a photo. So initially, I would just take photos of friends, and then I remember like when we did big birthday parties at Obar, Nick was literally trying to document everybody who arrived.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure I had everybody's photos so that
Yes.
when we look back, I knew who was there,
Mm-hmm.
and all these things.
And we even went as far as when a friend's bag was stolen, we were trying to see if there's
We were
any.
trying to piece together the night.
Are there any photos showing that stranger in our midst?
Yeah. So that's evolved. And then if anything, and throughout this though, is like I also had noticed I didn't take photos of myself.
Mm-mm.
And I'm not comfortable with giving my camera or phone to other people. And
I've
so
had mine damaged a few times
by Obar staff.
by accident.
Yeah.
And,
Totally
and we
accidental.
love them, but we just tease them about it.
It's been years and Toby's still teasing him about it.
Alam ni
So
Tom yan.
so that's also why stupid things like me taking a photo every time I walk to work. That's how that started. It was like me trying to document myself because I wasn't
Mm-mm.
doing it. That's why Toby and I have elevator photo booth shots,
Mm-mm.
because it was an excuse to, like, we have to take photos and just remember what we're doing. Also to see what couple shirt we're wearing.
Yeah.
But because admittedly we barely take photos together. And that's also, if you look at my Obar albums, for those who have access, you'll notice that the night begins where Toby and I will document that we're here.
Mm-mm.
And we'll take a few couples photos together, because admittedly for most of the night we're not going to be beside each other.
Yeah. I know I've tried to bump up my attempts to take photos. A large part of that is when you were in Singapore for an extended period. So I was trying to daily take a photo.
Yeah.
But that was also because I was trying to cope with an emotional strain that was hitting me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But then um, I sort of fell out of doing that again with the work from home situation, because it sort of felt nice to do it outside on the sidewalk when I
Yeah.
was walking. I'd always take a photo as I was walking. But then here, parang when I wake up, I want to take a photo of that. And then when we're working na, I don't want to like stop and take a selfie. I know I try to take photos of myself every now and then. Sometimes, let's say, um, when alone or in the elevator, or because I'm trying to feel more comfortable. Because I always feel like I look weird in photos.
Mm.
I've never been someone to have taken the time to find my good side, so to speak. But in effect, I always feel tuloy conscious na pangit yung post ko, or I'm posting weird or this and that.
Yeah, so and then especially in this quarantine, then that evolved to like, so I don't have a walking to work photo anymore, obviously,
Mm.
but then I have my workout documentation photos, and then it doesn't, and then depending on the audience, you see the safe ones where I still have my shirt on. There are others where I don't, depending on where you are. But then on the back end, I've curated all of these things, and then I love what I love about Google Photos is that how it plays with your library and creates things, and so then I've been getting a lot of these collages composed of a very old photo and a recent
Mm-mm.
photo, because it's a similar pose, it's a similar
And
shirt.
it's a nice for you. It's a nice way to see the journey you've taken.
Yeah, so that's also why, like, and admittedly, okay, it's also because it's become part of my habit, and when something becomes part of a habit, then I really stick to it. I'm kind of bonkers that way. But so so on the back end, I now curate a progress photos album for myself
Mm.
now per year. So I have a 2021 when I started working out, and then now there's a 2021. Just for the same thing. Then I can like and I know a lot of people say this when they post workout photos, and then it's just like progress check, ganyan, and all that, and that's fine. So now I sort of get it, but then I feel like it's more effective when I look at it over a longer span of
Mm.
time, and that's why I now have a year-long album I curate,
Mm.
and it's funny,
So
but I won't
asks,
necessarily share.
Tom asks, was it sort of a power trip? Hold up the camera and everyone flocks to you.
It was a little overwhelming actually in the beginning. It's like,
Mm.
ooh, especially I first learned this at soirees in high school,
Mhm.
and then like I would borrow the camera, I'd bring it, I'd raise it up, and then whoa, everyone's there, and like scrambling to pose, and like okay, and then I didn't really have to talk to anyone at the soiree. I
Mm.
just took photos.
Karen shares seeing my photos when I had to walk from Makati to BGC. Yes.
It's funny when Toby documents these adventures, and then it's like,
I mean,
so
what
funny.
was I documented? There was the walk from Makati to BGC, and I think there was like three of those.
Yeah, you had several like
There was
traffic, and
there
you
was
get
one
stuck.
where it was from here to Makati,
Mm.
and then there was the quest to find
I forgot what you're
the
looking for.
McDonald meal toys,
Ah, okay, yeah, yeah. Then you were like checking in.
and I had to jump over the hole in the sidewalk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then like the behavior has changed, but I think that's me. Like on the back end, my primary photo purpose is documentation.
Mm.
I am a photo documentarian in that regard, and then now that I can take so many photos, I really like capturing many, 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 many things. And that's why it's stupid things like what we had for lunch, and sometimes it's like the view outside the window,
Mm.
or yeah, when I'm walking around BGC and like how empty were the streets during the early pandemic? What would the queues look like? Like I have like a lot of these moments, and I'm seeing them now in my memories of like
Mhm.
1 year ago. And I don't know, and I like it, but then I don't know if I'll ever share like most of what I take. So I don't take as many as photos now because I haven't been going to Obar, but I have I have so many things, and then uh, yeah, it's just that game nights. I'm still not great at documenting the people at game nights because um, I don't know. I think I'm gonna change that. Like uh, when we get to have more regular in-person activities again,
Mhm.
I think I'm gonna expand my photo efforts again to have more people in them, and like um, yeah, we'll just take more shots just so that because I feel like 2020 was, and I was trying to curate like a photo to post for today. So
Mhm.
the photo I used as a teaser was a snapshot of my Google Photos albums page. But then it's like, oh, I don't really have nice albums except for like, I went back to 2019 when music could still go out. So last year, it's mostly albums for like my Star Trek ships or my
Mhm.
Transformers. But because there just really wasn't as much going on. And then it's kind of sad. So that's one thing I want to do. And then the other was like I was saying the other day, like there's a song I remember, like I can perform it at Obar, and then I wanted like to rewatch that performance, but then I realized I didn't have that video, and then now I'm like, "Ugh, now I want to make sure that every song done by every Odiva, I have at least one version of it on video.
Mhm.
It's that grasping at the things that we don't have access to now. Now I want to really make sure like I capture it. So I don't know.
So Jay shares, I get it. There was a time people who normally don't interact with me all of a sudden become friendly when I have my camera ready.
Right? People don't see you; they see the camera.
Karen mentions, have you ever thought of switching from photos to video?
For Obar, yes. I tried to take videos of the perform, but I still like photos because videos take longer to render and then they get blocked for music. Whereas photos are still more easily usable by the girls because a photo can be turned into a poster, a thing, and
Yeah.
it's more convenient.
My thoughts on that fall more under, if you look back, a lot of your old photos you can still actually view them, the old digital photos. But a lot of the old digital video you have trouble loading them now because
Mm.
of the technological adjustments. So I always am wary of switching to video completely because I worry 10 years from now if that video format will still be one that can be played back.
Well, Google Photos also backs up your video and then converts them
Mm,
into something readable, and it uses on the back end the YouTube player to play. So that helps. So that's like, so my OBAR stuff is uploaded by Google Photos, and then it's cross posted to YouTube, and then it renders there, and then I get to share that.
mm,
So that helps. But I don't know. I'm not like, I don't think I'm full on vlogging yet in that sense. This was the closest attempt. This show was our closest attempt to vlogging,
yeah.
but even then we did a different format. But like taking videos of people at events, I don't know. I'm not sure. There's still on the back of my head. There's still the capacity issue. It 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 still eats up a lot of memory, and I'm even though I have an extra memory card installed on my phone, I'm always conscious of that. It eats up memory and it drains my battery faster. So then I feel like photos are still safer for surviving an extended period of time. And then shareability. It's like because people, I honestly feel like people don't take the time to watch the video. They will, at least if it's a photo, if a set of photos, they can skim quickly and
Mm,
choose the ones they want to focus on.
mm.
But with video, it's like it's a higher barrier of investment. Oh, hey Patricia, we're about to wrap up, but
Hey,
hey,
Patricia.
it's late, it's late. So
Mitch also shares use of had a weird album documenting leg room from the Blades ride.
I used to do that too. I did like to document the amenities on the plane.
I think I'm more active taking photos and documenting when I'm on a trip
Traveling.
because I sort of do like the idea of documenting things. So normal everyday at home things, I don't really find myself documenting things. Um, the ones that I do document, I realize I get sad when I realize I've stopped doing that.
Mm.
So I don't know. It's a thing for me
Mitch uses her book or her tissue pocket as a measuring tool
for the leg
for the
room.
leg room. Okay. And then she says, major effort in video, but yes, I started doing it with the mini video of the walking tour places I visit when then with OST.
Hmm.
And you know, it really depends on how you want to use it. And like but I guess like if it's eventually for the purpose of sharing, I don't know. But like there was I don't know, I used to create like when we went to the dinosaur exhibit in
Hmm.
my museum, I took a mix of videos and photos, and then I turned it into a compilation video. And Google Photos has this weird curated video thing, which is like an interesting photo album type
Hmm.
approach. My sister, in her first few months of her first baby, uh, would curate all of her photos and videos into a monthly video, and that was like her photo album
Yeah.
for Mason, and it was quite an interesting labor. Over time, she was not able to maintain it
Hmm.
over the first maybe 6 months, I think. But it was like I look forward to that highlights
Yeah.
thing every time, and it's nice how it does that. And then Google Photos um, plays with that algorithm a lot. So then like it figures out Mason's face, and then it did like a parang 1 year
Hmm.
apart photo video thing, and like, oh my god, this is amazing. So
Hmm.
I appreciate digital solutions like that are trying to help with memory curation, nostalgia, and inspiration and all that. And that's I guess that's sort of why I stuck to Google Photos all this time, because it's still on the back end. I feel like it's operating on the Picasa principles, and I love that. And I don't know if you get the same experience like Apple people with iCloud and things like that. What does it do with your photos? I know OneDrive tries to do like some thingamajigs, but I don't
Hmm.
really put a lot of photos in OneDrive.
So Patricia also shares sometimes phone memory running out because has tons of photos. I mostly take photos, save photos of Whitney. Yeah. I think as long as the internet is not good enough that we can all use and rely on the cloud, we will always still be limited by the limits of our local memory. Um, and I know some phones try to circumvent this by having like slots for memory and
It's a
stuff.
hassle though.
But it's not just not only a hassle, but for some it's still clunky in the sense that um, like it might allow you to save photos there, but it won't allow you to save video or download stuff. So it has all these little frustrations depending on the model. And then I'm always worried about cloud services. Um, and we've had that happen. Like when PhotoBucket had to close, suddenly you had to download everything and you had to back up everything. And I'm afraid when the day comes when, let's say, Facebook or something closes, and now we have all these new albums in the higher resolution images that we have to download or consider giving up on.
Yeah, well, and that's I think that that'll be my last talking point is that me naman and like I fully embraced my digital approach to things in the sense that I have no intention of printing my photos or
Mhm.
using them for anything large scale. So like I think I configure my phone to take them at I don't take them at the highest resolution that I
Mhm.
can take because I'm trying to balance the memory that is consumed. So so I do take it 4 by 3 and 12 megapixel, which isn't bad. But I could change it to higher, depending on the other options.
Mhm.
Actually, I'm spoiled na nga 12 megapixel. Na. And
Mhm.
then, um, but yeah, Google Photos, at least for the next few months, still uploads unlimitedly, but only at a high resolution setting, which
Mhm.
is the largest side is reduced to 2048 pixels long, which is not bad, but it's not 12 megapixels. But
Mhm.
I'm no longer married to like I need to have the high resolution version of the
Mhm.
photos. Um, it's because at 2048 that's already still A4.
Yeah.
It's still big, uh, but I don't bother. And then, um, although I know I'm going to have to think about paying for storage finally, because Google Photos is no longer going to be free.
Mhm.
uh, it's no longer have that free upload option starting I think June of this year or the next. So I'm stealing myself for that. June 1. Um, Anything before June 1 is still free. Everything after June 1 won't be free anymore. But I don't mind. I don't know if I'm gonna switch to the original photo quality though. Because if
Mhm.
I'm gonna pay for it anyway, then should I back it up at full resolution na?
No, I don't think so.
Yun nga eh. This is convenient kasi it'll take longer to back up.
And we're still not taking photos that we plan to have printed.
That's the thing.
So we
Like
never really need it at a
if you're
super
not
high.
gonna print it, then you're not gonna need like really long stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I guess to close, since we are talking about the cloud, there is now that consideration of, you know, in terms of the albums you take, in terms of the photos you take, in terms of the video clips you take, because in the FGTC, for example, we have Mitch's voice files that are endearing, and I'd love to have that stored in albums as well.
Hmm.
Because Mitch has her happy birthday song greeting.
I know, right? I feel I should go dig through Messenger and
Um,
save all of them.
we have our moments where we record, not just photograph, but sometimes record funny video of us playing something, our secret Hitler game, our Happy
Those
Salmon sessions.
those are here.
Yeah,
Those are in my Google
and these
Photos.
are all snippets that sometimes lose. Sometimes they get lost because they're not where your albums are.
Yeah, I mean like for me at least. So the videos and stuff. So photos and videos are automatically backed up.
Mm.
That's not a problem for me. It's like everything is synced. Mitch's songs though are only in Messenger, and I've
Yeah.
never taken the time to save them. And maybe I'll do that.
Well,
But maybe I want to do that. Karen was asking if I upgrade Google Photos, will my email become upgraded? Yeah, you're gonna get switched over to Google One. So it's the shared data across Drive, Gmail,
mhm.
photos, and so yeah, it's super super.
And surprisingly, like ako, I adjusted the.
He had to because of work because
Um,
his
I
drive
may
is
have
full of
to
work. Okay.
I have so much files. But I actually don't feel it as a painful cost. I really feel how it has helped.
Because you're paying like $100 lang or something. I mean, like I know
Before
it's
it was 89 pesos a month.
yeah, but you're
Now
on the
it's a
higher
little, yeah,
plan.
now it's a little bit more, but it's still okay. So yeah, it's okay. Money Curse was the other one we were taking video clips of, and I guess that's what I wanted to end with. Because think about how you keep track of all these things now, of the albums that you build, of the photos you take, of the video clips you record. Um, and consider how you are seeing them long term. Um, as mentioned, many of us did start with photo albums, and given the progress of technology and time, the only way now to really keep many of the photo albums is to either digitize them or find ways to have them chemically, physically reproduced. I mean, I know
Mm.
there are places where you can,
There are people who have the negatives still.
and I know there are some where you can have a photo turned back to a negative. It basically, they take a high resolution photo of the high resolution photo,
Mm-mm.
and it allows you to create negatives again that you can have printed again. But then the photography is still a risky thing to rely on, as we can see digital photos more and more are taking over everything. And with that, um, now at our current point in time where we're happy with our video and we're happy with our photos, we have to bear in mind that technology may shift and render some formats obsolete or this or that. So consider as well how you start them. Google, at least since they play with the formats to some extent, they might allow you to retrieve them in different ways. I know Photo Bucket was basically download the zip, bahala ka na sa buhay mo, and that was just frustrating. So yeah, think of those things this early because you might as well, since we're all trapped at home right now. At least we're not generating as much new material and photos as we normally do. And you, any closing?
Um, yeah, I mean, like, so if you want a very convenient solution, I mean, I've only heard of one bad story about Google Photos, and I don't know what happened to that. And I'm really sorry for our friends who had a weird experience with it. But for
Mhm.
everybody else, it's like it's fire and forget it. It's just supposed to like um it backs it up automatically, and then I get all these interesting creations like it'll do like uh me in color background black and white, or or the it makes collages,
Mhm.
it does, or when I take burst shots at Obar, it turns them into gifs, which then are like funny. It's just like I don't know, there's a novelty to gifs versus video sometimes. So or it creates gifs out of my videos.
Mhm.
It's a very fun tool, but I know now it's gonna turn into a paid solution if you run out of the 19 gig
Mhm.
that you share across Gmail and Drive. So I mean that's a bummer, but it's still not a bad solution.
Mhm.
Um, but I just like that approach. I've built my, if you are like me who takes a lot of photos and you want to document your life through photos and video, then a solution like Google Photos or whatever else you want to use is a great way to do it. I just like the way Google Photos plays with it, um, and then all these things. It is a little buggy on mobile in the sense that there's sync issues. Like if I make album changes online, then it doesn't sync always to the phone, and I
Mhm.
clear the local data on the phone, so it's like it resets my installation, and then
Mhm.
it syncs everything. Then it works fine. But just sending the photos up to the cloud, it works okay. And then so then we get like our Chromecast is a screensaver of recent photos of
Mhm.
board game covers because I have an album of just board game chants, and then my nephew Mason, although that album is no longer getting updated, and things like that. It's fun. And then Karen wants to try it. Sure, I can. If you have questions, you know me and Google. Just reach out to me and I'll help you through the process.
So to end our episode, Mitch has one question.
What
What?
is that one or three photos you'll invest to have printed and framed, wedding future setting? I don't know. I don't know if I super have a lot of photos. Like I already feel like this is the one that I super want to keep.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, there's definitely like some of the photos from when you and I first met, and I know
Mhm.
you printed some
Mhm.
things that I'm in like the Voltes 5 shirt, and which is
Mhm.
also why I hold on to that Voltes 5 shirt. Those are definitely very impactful memory wise, but I have admittedly, because I take thousands of photos, I have so many photos I like.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know. So, but yeah, but I definitely that early photo with Toby, and then I don't know about recent stuff that I want to like super save.
Mm-hmm.
Like we haven't had a super big event, and then obviously something with Mason. It's like I don't know. We have some really good ones, but um, I don't have a good answer. How about you, Toby? What are your thoughts?
I think um, I'm coming from having lost gigs of albums when a hard drive was destroyed in the past. So I've kind of gotten myself already to the mindset that the photos are great, but you'll always create new memories. You'll always have more photos. So I'm not particular in the sense of, this is important, so it must be printed.
Hmm.
The fact that we have the photo is great. If we can display it in different ways, that's great. But I don't have a parang, if I can only save one photo, what will it be? I've already accepted that if I lose them, it's fine. I still have the memories of them.
Isn't that interesting though that the physical converting it back to physical media makes it more important?
Well, it gives you a permanence to it, which sort of
It's just
assigns a
ironic because
certain
it's
value.
not permanent.
Yeah. So, um, given the choice, I really would like to somehow find a way to make um, an album that would nicely transcend, and have longevity. Whether it's just us or whether it's even for people beyond us, but at least they can revisit it and see us and stuff and something like that. So I'm not anymore that tied to a specific photo.
Cameras, have you tried Amazon Photos? No.
No.
I'm a Google boy. So I'm super dedicated to the Google ecosystem. Um,
Yeah.
Karen thinks about her boudoir photos. Those are fun.
And there was.
Mitch is like her birthday with the pandemic cake, perfect cake for
Mhm.
this year. Uh, so yeah, so I don't know, and like um, it would just be interesting. Like, so how are people? So that I guess that's the question I have for everyone. Like everyone watching this who watches this in the future. So what are you doing? Like, how are you curating these memories? Is it just enough to post it on a social media feed? If it's just in your Instagram, is that it, or is there something else you want to do to really preserve it, or do you rely on things like time hop and Wayback whatever to like dig up
Mhm.
old photos for you and do the remember this day moment and then that's it? It really depends, and then I feel like whatever solution it is, uh, it's just nice if it does something with it. So it's like even posting all your photos on Facebook is not that terrible, although they really downsize the size. But they have their own efforts of like trying to dig up. And then when you have those like friend anniversary, then it tags all the photos you have together and things like that.
Mhm.
Whatever. So that's how Karen's like, it's nice you're saying I inspired to document more. In the beginning, I was being super ironic. When I first created an Instagram account, I wanted to do only ridiculously constructed photos, and like I was going to do an Instagram feed, and because
Mhm.
I was making fun of people doing it. But in the end, I just got into it, and then I just started documenting things. I used to take black and whites, or I convert photos to black and white, and then it's stupid things like if now what would I put on that early day feed? It would be like maybe just the lip, the teeth of the shark, or tube guy, but like sprawled out, artsy, feeling artsy things. But I um no, but I like photography because it is a way of contributing to history. That always struck me. I think it was a humanities class when we talked about the early days of blogging, but how blogging was people actively was a public journaling, but it
Mhm.
was actively people documenting aspects of history. And that's also why my personal blog, I still sometimes take time to mention real life events
Mhm.
to situate where it is. So in the weird sense, if someone in the future finds it and then like, oh, then sorry, this blog came from the pandemic of 2020 and 2021. So and then I feel then that philosophy moved me to photos as well. That I keep wanting to capture moments, and then I guess now since we're no longer limited by the price of film, and oh my god, I spent so much allowance printing photos. Um, then it's such a liberating feeling, and so all the more I just want to capture things as they happen. Um, so that's me in photos, and that's why I will continue to, even if just for my personal benefit, curate these albums together. And then Toby has an automatic Google Photos album that if he is in the photo, he has access to this one album that has all his photos, and I can do that for friends. Like I could do an FGTC album, for example, and then it could be all of our photos, but it would have to be with our faces in it. So I don't know. I can experiment. I wonder what it would look like. Yeah. Okay. We've already said too much. We're pushing 2 hours. We're down to 5 people watching. But thanks for sticking around for 2 hours. Sige, let's try that Google Photos experiment. I'll see if I can. The facial recognition is tricky because my OBAR photos distort everything. Because drag queens are very hard for Google Photos to identify, and then it keeps trying to match them to female friends. That's my only warning for this, but we can try. Yeah, it'll be private. It could be private and auto updating. It's kind of bonkers that can happen. So, okay. Anything else, Toby?
I guess that's just about it.
Wow.
I think we covered everything we can about the lost art of photo albums. We have more episodes for you for the rest of the week. Tomorrow will be another quiet day for us because we'll be doing something else. But Thursday,
we will be talking about footwear.
So it's all about shoes, all about footwear, because Thursday is the day that washing the feet is an important practice. Friday, on the other hand, we will be having special guests.
We have the drag artists of Antutan Says, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I've shared the poster already. I'm going to post it again tomorrow. So it'd be great if you can join us. If you're not doing anything else on a Good Friday, you might as well join us, right? And have some fun with some beautiful creative people. And then Sunday, we're talking about eggs. Because it's Easter Sunday, and that's it. We don't have a solid idea beyond that. They're just going to be eggs in that episode.
Whether it's about eating them, decorating them, or playing with them, we'll talk about eggs. But for now, that's all the time we have for this episode. We had a lot of fun. We are very thankful you joined us tonight, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
If you have questions or suggestions for future episodes, fill out the Google form at bit.ly Baduy Pride Ideas. You can follow us on Twitter, all Toby No Shade, RG Sunigo.
You could also check out our blog, baduypride.com, for all the previous episodes and stuff about us.
Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget my last question. How are you curating your memories? What are you doing? I would love to hear what people are doing with photo albums. There are even services that you can send your photos and they'll turn it into a scrapbook. It's like all these print things, but it's more in the US. So I'd love to know. Let us know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream. Once again, I'm Rocky.
And I'm Toby.
And this is Baduy Pride. Good night, everyone.